Today, the cash ban is quietly shelved, at least for now. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. The Australian today, the 25th of November, has carried an article saying that the controversial $10,000 cash ban legislation has been quietly shelved. Assistant Treasurer Michael Sukkar has been in charge of the cash payment restrictions bill, which has been quietly shelved. A controversial plan to ban businesses from making or receiving cash payments of more than $10,000 has been quietly shelved by the Morrison government after pressure from influential industry groups and a backlash from coalition MPs who warned it took away people's freedoms. Government's sources confirmed that there will be no attempt to push the restrictions on the use of cash bill through federal parliament in the final sitting fortnight of the year, and conceded there was little enthusiasm to move ahead with it. While they insisted that it had not been completely dropped yet, they would not be surprised if it ended up that way. Introduced to federal parliament in September last year and stuck in the Senate, the bill established a cash payment limit of $10,000. From January the 1st this year, it was meant to introduce fines of up to $25,000 for entities that made or accepted those payments. The cash payment limit would not apply to private transactions such as the sale of a private car to another person. And the legislation was drafted after Treasury's Black Economy Task Force found large cash payments could be anonymous and untraceable and gave businesses an unfair advantage while allowing them to underreport income. And it was also designed to crack down on crime syndicates, which can use large sums of cash to avoid the attention of authorities. Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce, a vocal opponent of the bill, said people did not want governments to be in every corner of their lives, and the idea that they could be told how much cash could be used for business transactions was obsessive and Orwellian. It pushes buttons amongst your true believers you don't want to push. On our side of the political fence, the freedom of the individual, liberty, that means holding liberty to hold cash, he said. We understand criminals use cash, but we can't start organising our life around the actions of criminals. Criminals use fast cars. Are we going to ban them too? An Assistant Treasurer Michael Sukkar's spokesman said the bill will be prioritised in the context of the government's broader legislative agenda. Opposition Assistant Treasury spokesman Stephen Jones noted the decline in the use of cash had only accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic, but warned there was still significant affection for hard currency amongst the elderly and in some multicultural communities. The Senate's Economics Legislation Committee earlier this year requested the government make a number of changes to the bill before trying to pass it through Parliament. These included reviewing the penalties for one-off breaches, which were less likely to be for money laundering and tax evasion purposes, to ensure they were not overly harsh. And the committee's coalition and Labour senators also wanted the government to assess the impact of the bill on migrant communities, particularly in relation to funerals, to determine if there were potential negative impacts. While the major parties said the legislation should be passed if its committee recommendations were adopted, Labour Shadow Cabinet never finalised the position on the legislation, and the government has let the bill slide. So there's a couple of points to make. The first is, of course, it's not completely dead, just sleeping. But this is quite typical. If people don't want to admit defeat, they simply go quiet about it and eventually it disappears. So this is a victory, and it's a victory for those many thousands of people who sent letters and made phone calls, all advocating that the bill be withdrawn. But there's a broader point to make. Of course, the cash ban was seen by many, including myself, as the first step in trying to control cash as part of the broader economy as interest rates are taken lower and into negative territory. And unfortunately, negative rates are still likely to come later. That means that we need to be very much alert to other mechanisms which could be used to keep cash within the banking system. By the way, that was one of the critical arguments, forcing people to use banks to transfer funds rather than choosing to use cash and keeping cash out of the banking system. Now, you could argue the rise of a digital dollar to replace cash, or indeed simply the continued banning of cash unofficially by many firms and shops, is already helping to remove the cash risk. But my key point was always a civil liberties issue. Civil liberties means protecting those rights we have and not giving them up. And so there, at least, is a victory in the short term. So we have to move now to the bail-in bill and a number of other pieces of legislation, including, I think, the question of the removal of protections for lending around responsible lending. The work goes on to try and keep the financial system much fairer and to protect the interests of individual households and individual businesses. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.